Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to HIMediaTV. I'm your host, Evan from HIMediaTV, and welcome back to another chapter of my little black book. And today I want to talk about economics. I want to talk about economics, and I want to talk about the SNAP benefits being shut off this coming November because the Trump administration wants to gut Medicaid and doesn't want to negotiate about it. Now, for many of you who are probably screaming at your phones right now, it's because Democrats want to give illegal immigrants health care and stuff. No, they don't. They don't. That's some shit that was made up. You're not going to believe me because Trump lies, but not to you, right? He never lies to you. But I'm going to talk about a couple things in this video episode, what have you. The first thing I want to talk about is COVID and the stimulus checks that we got as Americans in the early months of quarantine. I'm just going to talk about the stimulus payments. These stimulus payments, totaling at the absolute maximum you could get over the, 2.5 years, but at least initially it was what? $1,600, if I remember correctly. We got $1,600. And I want to remind everybody what was going on during that time period. The economy was in a tailspin. Right? The stock market was crashing. The price of things was going through the floor, which, is not necessarily a terrible thing for everybody. But the fact of the matter is that a lot of businesses were staring down the barrel of insolvency because people stopped showing up. And the people that did show up, got the bare necessities until we had the stimulus payment. This is a concept that I like to call trickle-up economics, the inverse of trickle-down economics, the myth that if you give rich people tax breaks, they spend more money and it goes into the economy. No. That runs antithetical to the entire system of capitalism. When capitalism doesn't happen when rich people don't have to pay any taxes. Capitalism happens when money moves freely and frequently throughout the economy. Example: you work at a grocery store. You get paid. You then spend money at said grocery store. That money is then used by the grocery store to pay a handyman who they bring in from outside. That money then some of that money that is paid to the handyman goes to pay his landlord. His landlord then takes that money, part of which to fix up the house, part of which to maintain, pay his own bills, and then he takes that money and goes to the pharmacy. And you see how when people who get this money and have multiple points of interaction, it spreads a lot. And GDP, one of the biggest boosters of it is when money is circulating frequently. This is a big reason why rich people hoarding wealth is a bad thing. It is money that is not being spent in the economy. And if it's not being spent in the economy, then it's just useless. It is a drag on the economy. And not only that, rich people, because there are less of them, they per capita spend less money compared to, relative to the amount of money they bring in compared to people who are lower on the economic, ladder. When a poor person spends their hard-earned money, that money is circulated in the economy with many, many more points of interaction before it just ends up in an offshore bank account somewhere. For a rich person, they might, pay a handyman, or they might pay like their staff wages or whatever, but any substantial costs of money are going to go towards things like a house, another house, or a yacht, or some other rich person ancillary nonsense that has maybe one or two other points of interaction before it just ends up in another rich person's dragon hoard. Trickle-up economics, which is the basis of how capitalism is supposed to work and how it works successfully, meaning a large amount of people using the money that they get and that money being used in multiple points of interaction in the community, is how communities stay and become and stay prosperous. To bring it back to COVID, this is why after the first round of stimulus payments went out, the economy shot up from its giant trough that it was going. Now, granted, a month and a half, 2 months later, it immediately started going down again because, the people who got those stimulus payments ended up taking that money and spending it on things like groceries and bills and rent and toiletries and ancillary expenses that they need to live. This is and there's economic data that verifies this. SNAP is getting canceled next month, this coming month, in the next few days. Not canceled so much as it's not being paid for. So to the point of, by the way, we've always had buffers in case of government shutdowns. There's a reason why SNAP still went out even during the longest government shutdown we ever had. It's because the government usually shores up a buffer of it from other things to make sure that people still get their federal benefits. The Trump administration gutted all that as part of their Doge cuts. And so now, as the president of Argentina wins his election, and after a $40 billion infusion of American taxpayer money, don't worry, that's an entire other chapter in my little black book, we are staring down the barrel of 41 million Americans not having the ability to get groceries next month. But I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking. If moral arguments could convince a person like Donald Trump, Stephen Miller, J.D. Vance, insert whatever ghoul from the current administration you want to, it would have worked, and it doesn't. So we're going to talk about it from an economic standpoint, because while I don't believe that they care about the economics of it at all either, they pretend that they do. So let's talk about the economics of it. Do you remember earlier in this episode, a few minutes ago, when I was talking about the economic benefits of, what the stimulus payment in the early days of COVID did, and how it saved the economy from collapse? Yeah, well, while the total amount of payments over the course of the 2 years that were given was about $800 billion. I need to remind everybody that we're in a recession right now. These food stamps and stuff were still going out at the time. We are currently sitting at the precipice of a recession, dare I say a depression, in the entirety of America's stock market and gross domestic product (GDP) is propped up by the so-called Magnificent Seven, the top 7 tech companies that have been effectively trading multiple billions of dollars with each other to pretend that there is growth in the economy. You remove them from the equation, we've been in a recession for 3 years. And if you're not a rich asshole who's like got mommy and daddy's money, you know this, you feel it. The economy feels like shit. The economy's felt like shit since COVID. Sure, Biden did a handful of things that might have helped a little bit, but not much, if at all. Most of those were gutted because of ghouls like Christian Cinema and Joe Manchin, but, shitty corporate Democrats are going to do what shitty corporate Democrats do. The point I'm making is $13 billion is set to be sucked out of the economy overnight. Most people get their benefits around the 8th, 9th, 10th. And a reminder that these SNAP benefits can only be used for food and other commodities like that. Nobody's buying PlayStations or Switches with this shit. None of that. We are looking at multiple communities, multiple cities, townships, villages, what have you, all over this country are going to suffer, because you're going to have $13 billion sucked out of the economy. I work at Dollar General. I work at the first of the month. I see how many people come in with their EBT cards. I told my boss, next month is going to be terrible in terms of sales, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. It's because we service a lot of people who are lower income. And those people are not going to have the $332 on average, which is the average payment aggregate of all SNAP beneficiaries. They're not going to have that next month. And Trump and hell, even some dickhead libertarian leaning type of person whose Ayn Rand selfishness has eclipsed all moral, standing, might sit there and think, fuck it, they didn't work hard enough, fuck those poor people. You're not going to be unaffected by that either. Stores are going to close. Stores are going to close because of that. People are going to lose their jobs. Services, because the money went down, corporations and businesses will have to cut costs, layoffs ensue. Service gets shittier. Your quality of experience gets shittier. Oh, great. Now you have a lot more people walking around without jobs. Local businesses aren't going to be patronized as much. Oh, shit. Guess what? Local restaurants are now going to have to lay off people because now they've had a downturn of people coming in to patronize the restaurant. You see how all of this has a negative effect on the broader economy. The cuts that the Trump administration made to Medicaid and the like is going to raise premiums even for people with private insurance. But that's a whole nother episode. The fact of the matter is, these SNAP benefits getting cut is going to result in not just economic hardship for the recipients, but everybody in that community. Now, depending on how far you are on the wealth ladder, that might get cut here and there. Fine. You might be relatively insulated depending on your level of wealth. But unless you're very wealthy, if you're already feeling a little bit of hurt because of the current economy, you're going to feel it a lot more. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the best way to stimulate economic growth is to stimulate the bottom rung of society. There is a reason why wherever they have done experiments with universal basic income of some kind, people's lives get better. The areas that those people live in get better. If we are going to live in a society where we have to pay for everything we need to live, and we live under an economic system that sees the best results of the economy being successful and prosperous for everyone top to bottom, being the fact that people at the bottom rung are spending money the most frequently and diversely, there is no reason why we shouldn't do more things like stimulus checks or UBI. And cutting off people's SNAP benefits, which very well might cause some local stores and even chain stores like Dollar General to feel negative effects. I might be out of a job by the end of next month because of this. Because I'm the newest person there. And I'm the lowest person on the chopping block. That is a genuine possibility. Anyway, that's another chapter closed on my little black book, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of HIMediaTV. I have been your host, Evan from HIMediaTV. Lord have mercy, I'm tired. I go to work in the morning. If you liked this episode, you'll probably like episodes of our other shows. All find at himedia.gg/podcasts, or wherever you get your pods. And if and only if you have the financial wherewithal to do so, please consider subscribing on our Ko-Fi. Doing so gets you a bunch of awesome perks and exclusive content, all serviced through our Discord community, which you should absolutely join at the link down below. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening to this episode of HIMediaTV. I have been your host, Evan from HIMediaTV, and I will see you guys next time.